Hi, everyone. So, as people are just dropping in here, I'd like to first introduce myself. My name is Hua Hua, and I was originally based in Shanghai, but now I am currently based in Amsterdam. So, if anyone here is watching from Amsterdam or watching from the Netherlands, please say hi. I'm always very open to meeting more people in the community here, as I'm only recently moved to this area. So first, let me introduce myself. I am the founder of Borderline Shibari, which is a platform that started originally in China, where I ran events, teaching Shibari workshops, holding classes, doing performances and private sessions. And then I recently started moving things to online as well. So I run a Patreon page called Borderline Shibari. And on this page, I usually focus on making tutorials, blog posts, and session videos, because I found that for most people, especially my experience living in China, and I know a lot of my followers based maybe not in a major city, it can be quite hard for you to start to do shibari. It can be quite hard for you to start practicing or just get a regular practice in and understand a lot of the subtleties and the part of the culture, the historical elements, just by attending workshops. Or it might just not be so convenient for you or available for you to attend events and workshops. So I've been focusing quite a lot on online as well to make sure that Shibari can be accessible to everyone. So please, in our introduction, feel free to drop in where you're watching from, and I'm very curious to see how far this community really reaches. So I'm going to discuss today a little bit about my experience with Shibari, as well as a general introduction about what this is. Maybe you are logged in and don't even know what Shibari is. Maybe you've heard the name, but you don't know what it exactly is. Maybe you're not sure if what you're doing is Shibari, or if it's bondage, or if it's Kimbaku, which is another name for it. So I'll go through all of this today. And I'll also give some of my advice on finding a partner and how to really get started in a way that I think is much more safe, is a much more mindful way of going about this, and is also going to help you to understand Shibari in a way that is much more ethical and much kinder as well. Because I have to say, from my own experience, starting and exploring Shibari back before I knew about field, it was kind of daunting. It was difficult, and you often will put yourself in risky situations, maybe, or just maybe you're not exactly sure how to talk to people about this. So I will go through a lot more about partnerships and finding partners than actually showing you on-hand Shibari. So I would recommend, if you came here and you would like to see Shibari in action, then you can go ahead and also check out my Patreon page where you'll see everything. But today I just want to focus a little bit more on a general introduction. So when I first started Shibari, many years ago, I found that there wasn't so many resources online. And often it was either you had to learn about Shibari through porn and actually navigating a lot of sites where it wasn't really educational, it was more focused on entertainment, or you kind of have to try to meet people one-on-one, and it can be mixed with like a vanilla setting, and we usually say vanilla to mean people who are not kinky. And it was quite tiring to navigate by going on dating apps and just constantly reiterating the same thing and not necessarily knowing if the person is genuinely interested in it. So that's why I feel like today the most important element, if you want to start Shibari, is really knowing how to talk to people about it, and how to vet people to play with and discuss your opinion and what Shibari means to you. So I hope after this talk, we can get a little bit more clarity on how to approach people when it comes to Shibari. So first, what is Shibari? Shibari is literally the verb form of to tie. So it's just meaning to tie in Japanese. It's now been the decided kind of name for this culture, but you'll often also hear another word, which is the term kinbaku. And kinbaku means tight binding. So kinbaku and shibari have often been used interchangeably. Usually I would say shibari is a little bit of a broader term because of it's just a verb to tie. I would find that if you're interested in tying with people and it's not for a sexual purpose, if you're interested in tying with people for a creative aesthetic drive, if you are drawn to shibari maybe for a lot of its therapeutic or healing sensations that you might get out of it, or maybe you just like to do it to explore your body, or create installations to tie things, not even people. I find that shibari is more of a general term, so it's kind of a bigger umbrella. It just, if you like to use rope and you like to play, then what you're doing can be called shibari. Then the other term that's also confusing is shibari bondage? Is bondage shibari? So to get this clear, shibari does stem from BDSM culture. So BDSM has bondage, discipline, dominance, submission, and sadomasochism. So this is a very general term, which over the years people have added different elements that they count as BDSM. You might also hear this as kink. So I like to use kink quite often because I think kink is a little bit more open. It also might relate to if you're just interested in things, not necessarily for a power dynamic, but you just like the feeling of a certain material or a certain body part. So if you fetishize things, this can also be part of being kinky. So I find kinky is quite an open world. But shibari did stem from BDSM. So the bondage element of BDSM is where a lot of the drive came for it. And a lot of the people who developed shibari to what it is today, the masters in Japan, people abroad in Europe, a lot of them have been involved with sex work. So for example, creating porn, or for performing in kind of more red light district areas. So definitely bondage is what shibari is today. But as I said before, many people can choose to do shibari without necessarily having a sexual motive behind it. So that's why I think shibari has kind of stepped out of the BDSM culture, the kink culture, and it's kind of its own culture now. And it's a very, very huge international community that spreads far and wide. And it is often kind of blended with people's own styles and their own cultures, and their own influences. So it did come from Japan, this term, because where I learned and where a lot of people derived a lot of their techniques and a lot of their understanding and education about shibari has been from Japan. And this is, I think, a very, very important element. If you want to truly say that you're interested in shibari, you do have to take at least an interest in Japanese culture, because this is where it does come from. So I feel that bondage can be quite open, and it usually is just about restricting the body. But when it comes to shibari, shibari is often more in depth than just about creating some restriction. Yeah, it's not just the end result that's important and why we practice shibari. We practice shibari for the whole journey of it. So from how you discuss it with someone, how you build tension with someone, the very first touch that you have, the way you touch someone, the quality of touch, and then also the ropes, the process of it, the harnesses, the position, the emotional exchange, and even the untying. All of this, to me, is what makes Shibari much more of a well-rounded and devoted culture. So if you like to tie and you are quite interested in delving into it, you'll discover that Shibari teaches you so much. Yeah, it's not something, in my opinion, that we do just because we find it arousing. Yeah, there's usually a creative component to it. There's a lot of logic involved as well. You have to really think carefully about safety. You also need to think quite carefully about how you communicate with someone. And for that reason, this is why so many people become passionate about Shibari, and why, in my opinion, it takes a lifetime to really master. It is something that I feel, after doing for about 7 years, I've still only touched the very surface of what this culture is. And every time I tie, I learn more. Every new person that I tie with, I discover something completely different. So it's a very, very long journey if you're interested in it. But the great thing about that is there's a very large supportive community, which has now become much easier to access. And I found, thanks to dating apps like Field, and thanks to a lot of events and how it's portrayed a little bit more openly now on social media, it has become a lot easier for people to get in touch and to find how to practice and how to play. So now let me get into a little bit about how to get started. I think the first question when it comes to how to get started has a lot to do with, how did you find Shibari? So for anyone who's listening right now, please feel free to share with me in the comment section. How did you discover it? Okay, what did you see? What did you find that motivated you to actually be like, I actually want to try this out. I want to do this. Because for many of us, we've kind of heard of bondage. We've heard of bondage. We might have seen some images, but it doesn't necessarily drive us to start. Yeah, some people, it could be their whole lives. Yeah, they knew from childhood when they first started just picking up the jump rope that they had in the playground and started tying other people with it. Some people just knew that they really liked the feeling of pressure, of being squeezed, and only until later did they discover rope. I even know someone who just the smell of jute rope, when they first smelt it, they instantly felt this excitement and felt this arousal. So many people come from completely different resources and completely different perspectives of Shibari. And this will really make a difference in how do you actually get started if you can remember the source of where did you find it exactly. So for me, I discovered Shibari really through dating. And before I discovered Shibari, I had heard of bondage. And I had been kinky, I think, my whole life. I've always been very, very creative and very playful with my body and with my communication with other people. So naturally, when it came to my sex life, I was always very open about trying different things in the bedroom, playing with power, playing with toys, playing with body fluids. So I never really felt there was a very clear line for me about kink and vanilla. I just felt like it was natural to want to play, and maybe there are times when you want to play more than other times. So I never felt like any real shame necessarily towards being kinky, or that it was something that I was very secretive about necessarily. But I did understand that there was something generally taboo about sex as well. So it wasn't always easy to express this and express these desires, or necessarily know that you could pursue it. But I definitely did enjoy it in the privacy of my own home a lot. But not so much with bondage specifically, I think, because as someone who had no idea about what BDSM was, who was just more of a natural, kinky play kind of person, I think the idea of bondage probably would have scared me a lot if someone had told me about it before I actually witnessed it for myself. And I remember I had a date with someone before who had offered it, not them specifically, but they had offered that someone else who knows how to tie, that they had also met. So I was in an open relationship at that time. And they asked if I would like to be tied by another girl and that he could watch. And I remember in that time, that was probably my first kind of interaction with the option of actually being tied. But I could recognize that I didn't feel safe. I didn't know the person. The way that it was offered to me didn't feel very inviting and didn't feel like it was necessarily for my pleasure. And so I didn't take it. And I'm very glad now that I think back at it that I didn't just jump at that experience, because I knew in myself that I didn't feel that this person or the people who were involved with this were people that I trusted. Okay. And then only later, when I felt much more comfortable in my body, when I had come out as non-monogamous and really recognized that my values towards sexuality had changed, my values towards my body had changed, I became much more open and at ease with other people and much more trusting, then that's when I had another offer about Shibari. I'd met someone on a date and they had told me that they were planning to go to a munch. And I asked, what is a munch? And they said a munch is just a kind of a regular setting, like a bar setting where you can meet socially with other people who are kinky. And you can discuss kinks and everything like that, but no one's going to be playing because it's in a public space. So that felt very, very approachable to me. And it felt much more surprising, actually, that there is a community around this. I didn't know that there was people who actually met and talked about BDSM. I really had this kind of more taboo approach to it before. And so that's when I recognized that I was in much more of a safer space. The person that I was dating, I felt comfortable with. I felt I trusted what their interest was in it. And then when I went there, that's when I started talking to people about bondage, and people had mentioned that there was going to be a little workshop, just a community run workshop. And if I was interested, this sounded like it would suit me. And then I discovered it and I really fell in love. And after that, I just kind of dropped everything else that I was focusing on. And really just instantly, I felt like I found what was right for me. Both being tied and tying, I instantly felt like this was everything that I was leading up to. I was doing a lot with photography, nude photography, modeling. I was doing a lot of performances, and I just felt like everything that I was looking for to express my body, to connect with another person, that combined the sensual, that combined something very physical, something very demanding on the body, but also something very transformative and vulnerable. I felt like everything else that I was experimenting with was not as important to me. And that Shibari was really what was going to fulfill my pleasure in so many different ways. So I'm very, very thankful that I found a community, and that through knowing how I felt in myself and that I felt comfortable with through the dating process, that I could start in a way that was much safer, much more accountable as well, because I was in a public space. I was talking to people who had gathered together and who had self-organized events. So I knew these people were genuine and they were serious. And then when you access the community, you really do realize how much resources people share about consent, about safety, and what people know each other as well. In the BDSM circle and the Shibari circle, people know each other, so you can vet who is to practice with. And it just felt, as a young girl who was experiencing my body around a lot of other people, that I didn't feel threatened, and I didn't feel that people were just interested in tying me or tying with me for their own goal and for their own pleasure. Okay, so from my own personal story, my first advice to you, if you want to get started with Shibari, is to really recognize in yourself, do I feel at this moment that I feel safe to do this with? And is the people that I'm talking to and the people who are interested in Shibari also people that I'd want to be tying with? Okay, it's a huge community. So remember, you're not going to have only one opportunity to get started. If you're talking to a couple people and you're dating a couple people, it's worth it to really feel in yourself that you feel comfortable with them. Maybe you share some values, that you feel heard when you are talking with them, that you feel your communication with them is much clearer. That is more important when it's about starting Shibari, that you really choose the right person that feels safe for you. And if you're trying to look for someone and you would like to offer the idea about tying with someone, starting Shibari together, then you also need to be quite mindful about how you express Shibari. How do you ask someone, especially online, and you've never met with each other, how do you make them feel safe and heard and willing to do Shibari with you? This is honestly the biggest question that I always get as a Shibari educator over the years. Many people, the biggest issue is not really about the techniques. Yeah, the techniques can be found. You can practice them. That's not hard. The hardest part is finding a partner that is suitable for you, especially when you don't have community around you and you have to go through online. Yeah, or maybe it's in a situation that you're just quite shy and it's not very easy for you to talk about. And for most of us, it's very rare that there are, even to this day, it's still changing, of course, that generally most cultures still have prejudice towards BDSM, towards kink, towards liking anything other than the normal, very gendered kind of sex. So a lot of the problem that comes down to finding a partner isn't necessarily about the fact that there aren't any. There's a lot of kinky people, and if you can tell by the chat, and if you can tell by the group chat on Field as well, there are so many people that are interested in this. So it's not really about the quantity, it's really about yourself and how to start talking about it. And it can be very hard to overcome the shame as well, overcome the shame that you have yourself necessarily towards wanting to do kink, to do with acknowledging that there are certain things that you want to do to someone or have done to you that is not necessarily considered normal in normal society. So let me just have a look about how everyone got into ropes first. So I see some through YouTube videos, the aesthetic side, kinky parties. Okay, so a lot of people did have access to events, and really seeing it live, in my opinion, is It's very motivating because it's so hard to understand shibari just by reading about it or just by looking at pictures. The lived experience is really also what drew me towards it. Seeing it through photography and social media. Okay, some people also here are organizers, which is nice to see. And a lot of people I see have found it through images. So this is also a very important part about shibari, and it's a very valid part about it as well, is that it's a visual culture. So a lot of what has made it what it is today is come from porn as well. So the shibari photography is its own kind of genre in its own right. And I feel like the photographs of it are much more easier for people to access nowadays. Also on Instagram, you can see photos of it much easier, but it is incredibly beautiful. And I think that is what also really drove me to do this beyond anything else, was that it's had its own beauty in a way that really drew out the character and really draws out the vulnerability and the true kind of essence of the person in rope, in my opinion. It can also be just so arousing to look at, and just so incredibly beautiful to see the body in these positions. So yeah, totally. I'd say photography is a big part about it. And for many people as well, they like the images of shibari, but you also need to know that sometimes that's enough. A lot of ways people engage with rope in the community, I've noticed, is not necessarily by wanting to tie, wanting to be tied, wanting to talk to other people about it. Sometimes people just are shibari enthusiasts simply by watching it. A lot of people like to attend performances, but they don't necessarily want to do it. So that's also something I would say you need to discern quite carefully as well about what their interests are in shibari. What do they want to do? So for people here, what is it about shibari that makes, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to get tied when you see these images, when you heard about it, when you saw it in a performance? Did it make you want to get tied? Did it make you want to tie? Or did it make you just want to learn more about it and see it? Yeah? Everyone has very different motivations towards why they might start shibari. The body positions, the patterns, the creativity. Yeah, I also feel like I come here for a talk about shibari, but this feels like a considered talk convincing us about how interesting this person is. I also think this is a good point, though. In our community, when it comes to shibari, you also recognize that you come here originally just to learn how to tie, and you want to know all the actions and how to do it. But ultimately, I feel like shibari is a journey about your character, about learning about yourself, learning how you interact with other people, and learning about your own, I don't know, your journey towards your sexuality. So I do think this is relevant when it comes to understanding shibari. Building a different kind of intimacy. The mastery. Yes, so I'm really happy to see that so many people have such a lovely, different kind of perspective as well, and different things that draw you. So if you are invested in this community already, or if you are just a new beginner, I would like to just remind you to hold on to that reason about why you tie, because it is such a vast culture and you'll meet so many different people along the way, but it will help you grow, and it really will help you to enjoy shibari much more if you remember what it is that you liked about it originally and you mention that to people when you tie with them, because it's so easy to assume with kink and with Shibari that, okay, you like it, so obviously we must get along. You also like Shibari, so okay, let's try tying with each other. And I don't feel like that is enough. Yeah, it's so much more important to tie with people that align with the same things, because there can be a lot of issues around consent and a lot of issues around not necessarily knowing what you're going to get into. And I can give you a very clear example. For example, some people, they want to do ropes purely from a sexual purpose. And this I can relate to, because there was a time in my life where I was very much drawn to ropes purely for this high and the arousal out of it. But that didn't necessarily mean that I feel that attraction with every single person that I'm tying with. And if you can go into a situation where you're tying with someone and you haven't really discussed your motivations about why you like it necessarily, there can be an easy assumption that we have the same thoughts. So, for example, there could be an assumption that you consenting to get tied by me means that you want sexual contact, that you want someone to touch you in more vulnerable areas, that maybe you think of this as foreplay and that we're going to have sex afterwards. And this is where the the tricky thing comes, and where there's a lot of issues to do with consent. There's a lot of issues to do with sexual assault. And this, in my opinion, just comes down to not having enough discussion beforehand and making it really clear what your motivations come from, yeah, and why you want to do Shibari, yeah. So when you're starting, and even when you're in already a romantic partnership with someone, you really got to have these discussions very clearly. So take, for example, you've met someone on field. Okay, you talked, you mentioned that you really like Shibari. And maybe they're like, okay, we can try tying together. I also like Shibari. Please try to remember that you need to discuss with each other about what you like about it and what kind of things you are interested in it. And it's also very helpful to try to think, what are my limits and what are things that I am comfortable exploring with this person today, and sharing these things as well beforehand. Yeah, it can be exciting, this lovely taboo and this rush that a lot of us have. And often when we have like vanilla sex, so non-kinky sex, it's quite common for us to not have to discuss these things so much. Can feel more exciting to be everything to be improvised and just go with the flow and feel your emotions. But there's a lot more risk involved when it comes with Shibari. One could just be like, they don't necessarily know what they're doing. So just by tying someone, you don't necessarily know if you're going to injure them or not, if you're going to hit a nerve point, if you're going to force their body into a position that their joints won't naturally move into, or maybe they have an injury, maybe their body is not safe to do certain postures. So there was just so many things involved in it that it isn't, in my opinion, very sexy to just go into it completely blind. And I trust me, I'm telling you this from my experience. When I first started, I thought that way. I thought it was the rush. It was something that I automatically consented for. I was giving them my body, and for that reason, whatever they did to me was allowed, and I shouldn't really have the right to say no because I'm the submissive in this situation. But that's not the case. That's not the case at all. And the more we learn how to communicate all of the things that we like about ourselves, it can be kind of humiliating in some ways, but it's also really, really empowering. It really helps you to understand, this is what I like, and this is the way that I'm going to enjoy it best. And if you can find someone else who's not only going to accept that, but who's going to be enthusiastically interested in what you enjoy, or even better, they have the same taste. They want to do the Shibari for the exact same reasons as you, then you're going to have so much better of a time, and you're going to learn so much more about yourself and each other, and you're going to feel so much more comfortable going on this journey with them. So it can be hard when you're hungry for it, and maybe you saw it at an event and you just really want to get started and you really want to try. But please be careful out there. Please really remember that sometimes it does take much longer than you think to find the right partner that will work for you. Yeah, sometimes you can try with someone, you could meet and you go to an event together, you try it out and it's not working so well. But just remember that it really does come down to compatibility. If you have your shared emotions, if you feel your communication is good and solid with this person, the shibari is going to be way better. Yeah, the Thai is going to feel for pleasure. And even if you get some kind of kick out of losing control, and in kink we have a term, consensual non-consent, CNC. If that is something you like, that is also something that is sexy if you talk about it beforehand. Yeah, there's a very different feeling to when you're actually in a situation which is dangerous and abusive, and a situation where everything has been negotiated and you are safe to feel that you can enter into this role play and you can exit it and come back to reality and not be harmed from it. That is the most important when we do it. So whether or not you're doing rope or anything, you got to trust yourself. You got to really recognize who you are and who would work for you if you want to start doing this. So with that being in mind, you have this perspective and you feel, yes, I'm ready to start doing shibari. I feel like I'm confident in why I want to do it. And I also feel that I met someone and they are also interested. I feel I trust them. We've gotten to know each other a little bit. For example, we have this good dynamic. Maybe you have a little bit of chemistry in this way. Then good. Next step, I would say, is you got to start doing it. I do not recommend, in my opinion, being self-taught. There are resources that you can use online to try. So for example, on my Patreon, I have a lot of beginner stuff. But when it comes to shibari, you really cannot just learn online. You cannot just try YouTube videos, pictures, or books, because a lot of it is to do with things that can't necessarily be captured. They're things that you really have to experience in the here and now. So you got to go to events, even if that means you save up a little bit of money. You don't live necessarily in a big city, but you meet someone online necessarily who's in that city or who's willing to travel, and you can meet there. That can be worth it ultimately. Doing one event with a good teacher, for example, or seeing a performance done can really, really help inspire you and to put you on the right path when it comes to shibari. And when you do it alone, it can be great because you can foster a lot of unique ideas, but you are honestly doing it kind of in the dark. It's so hard to really understand the nuances of it without someone else there to guide you, or without seeing it really live. So what I hope is that through our group chat and hopefully through a lot of discussions, people can start sharing resources a lot more freely about events. I personally find that in most big cities around the world, there is usually some studios that even if you just do a quick Google search and you look up a shibari studio, you can usually find out. And there are so many types of studios now that you can also choose studios that align a little bit more with your identity. For example, there are studios that are much more inclusive and they're much more queer friendly. And there are definitely studios that are not, that can really affect how you learn shibari, especially if you go to a certain studio and you feel like the people that you're watching get tied, you cannot relate to at all. You don't have the same dynamic as your rigger, or necessarily you don't look the same as these people, and the ties that and the ties that you see that the teachers do just won't necessarily suit your body, then in my opinion, it's worth it to try to look for ones that are a little bit more something that you identify with. So that can also mean looking online. A lot of studios now, they don't just do offline classes, they also do online workshops, virtual kind of live classes, even stuff like this, live streams. There's quite a lot out there. So I think if you research quite thoroughly online first and find what kind of studios you identify with a little bit more, then you don't have to go often. Maybe you could go once in a year, but it's worth it to go to a place that you feel a little bit safer and that will respect your interests in Shibari as well. So once you find a partner as well, you can go to a studio. A lot of studios as well, you can go alone. I've definitely been to a lot of spaces and they're quite welcoming if you go alone. So yes, if you are in the same area with someone and you notice it when we're in the group chat, then please feel free to share resources, because this is honestly how you get the ball rolling as well. Let me break down as well what kind of events there are as well, so it's a little bit easier for you to decide how to search and how to talk to people about maybe starting Shibari with you. So there are more general kink spaces, and usually kink spaces have either play parties or munches or workshops. Okay, so if you meet someone at a munch, that is probably the best thing if you're a complete beginner, because munches are usually shared online. I'm guessing there are a few munches that are shared through group chats on Field as well. But a lot of them I found if you just kind of search it out online. Munches are just usually organized by people for free, and they are usually in a public space. So you have this already accountability and safety that you're meeting in a public space. You're not meeting people in a private space. And if you want to leave, you can leave. It doesn't feel so threatening necessarily if you're alone. Usually they're in a bar or a cafe. I've even heard of munches that have board games, some that are like an organized dinner somewhere. So picnics, there's a lot of picnic munches I've noticed in Europe as well. So these are great ways to meet the community, talk to people, and potentially you could find people that you vibe with quite well, and you two could start playing together as well. Then the next thing is workshops, and workshops are usually an educational space. So they can, depending on a certain venue, allow for a little play in it, but usually there's a guided teacher who will give you something to practice, and they'll watch you. So it's a bit more of an educational space. I think this is very important to recognize. It's not necessarily for you to just have fun. It can be a really nice date, but you do have to respect the fact that the venue opened the space for you to learn and not for you to just use it to play. And then the third one is the play parties. And play parties can vary depending on what the scene is like. But this is where you can also see some bondage performances. You can see people tying for fun, and you can see all kinds of things. So it can be other kinds of kinks. Usually there's a lot more comfort about wearing fetish clothing and wearing being nude. Yeah, depends on the rules of the play party. But this is a really great, fun way for you to experience bondage, shibari, experience things and watch other people do it. Please recognize, though, at these spaces that there always is certain etiquette that you should have. It can be really fun and exciting to go to spaces and just want to join in, but there's usually very strict rules in place to make sure the environment is harmonious, that you don't disturb someone else's scene. Yeah, that you don't just treat this as a hunting ground and you are trying to add everyone's phone number. You just ask people to tie without trying to make any conversation with them. So please respect, just because these are play parties and there's a lot of things that seem very allowed, it doesn't mean that you have to forget how to be a kind person and how to be respectful of everyone's privacy. and that maybe they just came here to play with their partner. They're not necessarily looking for someone else. Okay, so those are the usual kink events, and that's how you can also experience Shibari. But I do notice if you are serious about Shibari, these are very blended, and often not necessarily the places where people who have a lot of Shibari skill will naturally go to. I find that there's a lot of places that are dedicated to Shibari or do Shibari play parties where the Shibari is a bit more heavily focused. So if you know that you're more focused on just playing with Shibari, then I would suggest focusing on looking at Shibari dojos, studios, whatever they call it, which are usually venues that hold classes. Okay, so if you want to learn Shibari, there's often some open classes out there, which are a lot more affordable. You can go as a group, you can go alone, you can go with a partner. I would generally recommend, if you can, to bring someone that you are already familiar with. So you can try it as a first date. I would say it can be a little bit risky, but it would be nice to go with someone that maybe you met and you're dating, or maybe you just have a feeling of friendship towards, you feel close to, just to try it out with. Because when it comes to Shibari, often you do get a lot of the practice by being close and up and close with someone. You do have to touch each other. And so if you do it with someone and you feel that you just cannot break the ice with them, you don't feel comfortable having a lot of close contact, physical contact with them, or maybe you just, I don't know, you feel overly polite and you don't feel like you're there yet, it can be quite hard for you to get started and get the ball rolling. So it doesn't mean you need to have a sexual relationship with them. It just means that you're relatively comfortable with physical contact. So I've often just taken a friend to these classes. I feel that sometimes if you go with someone who you've had a little bit more of a romantic relationship with necessarily, it doesn't necessarily mean that you suit being in a public space together playing with. So just really try to think carefully about what partner you would like to choose. So I did see a question. Any events in the Netherlands you recommend? I've been to quite a few, but I'm glad to learn about more. I haven't been to so many events in the Netherlands, and I think this is honestly part of my problem with being an organizer myself, is that I sometimes forget to go to other events. I've only just recently moved here, but I will be setting up some mostly beginner and introductory workshops around. I like to collaborate with different kind of spaces because I like to make a good introduction to Shibari. So you can always look out for my events, and I'll be posting those regularly on my social media. But otherwise, in Amsterdam, there is a regular jam run by Rope Lounge. So if you look up Rope Lounge, it's run by a rigger called Asiana. This is a jam that I recommend. It's nice. They have Shibari jams, which are just open practice space. They have a beginner class, and it's a very good community that's been here for quite a long time. There's also Ellipsis. I think that's in a different part of Holland, but I'm not sure where. Ellipsis is also a long, ongoing rope jam event. So if you're in the Netherlands, you're also welcome to go to those. So I really hope that everyone is willing to go out there and look for these events, because if you don't interact with Shibari Live, it can be really hard for you to meet partners who are also serious about it. I found a lot of the time you do need this offline interaction, and these are spaces that you can learn and you can practice in. And then, of course, you can also play at home. So playing at home is very important, but you have to blend what you've learned in classes and play. So practicing at home, I think, is really where the fun of why we do Shibari is. Not everyone wants to do it for the community, but you do need to take your time and really learn very basic fundamental steps as well before, like learning how to do a good single column tie, understanding about how to control your tension, understanding how to do basic frictions, understanding simple nerve safety, especially to do with the arm. And then you can learn a few harnesses as well going along with it. But you'll usually learn these at a studio or with a teacher, and then you'll have time to practice and play by yourself. Do I have any resources, events, or studios that I'd recommend in New York? In New York, I've heard of Temple. Temple, I think it's run by both a mistress and a switch. I'm not sure. But I've heard some very good things about Temple. So you could take a look at that. That is a Shibari, and mostly Shibari, but also a kink space. So if you're in New York, you can check that one out. I'm not sure about Ontario, Canada. I'm sorry, I don't have friends in that area. But usually you can look around. You can look on Instagram, maybe. You could give it a Google search. You could check with people on field. So if you're talking and be like, I'm interested in Shibari, do you know anywhere to meet? Then usually you can find it. People share quite easily. Austin, I'm not sorry, I'm not so familiar with the US. I'm familiar a little bit more with some cities in Asia and in Europe. So if anyone wants any questions based on Europe, I would say in Germany, I really recommend a group called the Karada House. Yeah, they're based in Berlin. I see someone has recommended that, which is great. They do a lot of classes. They do a lot of online classes as well. And they will be opening a new physical space soon. So if you are based in Germany, they're in Berlin. They're very worth traveling to as well. I would recommend that. There's not many spaces I know that are very queer friendly. So Karada House is definitely one of them. I would check that out. So I'm guessing a lot of people have a lot more questions to do with where can I find these spaces. So when we move into the Q&A, I can try to answer as best as I can to my capacity. But honestly, it does come down to asking the people around you. Yeah, so the people that you're matching with. If you share about the fact that you're interested in Shibari, it'll be much easier. So I just want to end our discussion today a little bit about how to adjust how do you talk about Shibari with people on field. And that the first thing that it comes down to is your profile. So I would definitely throw it in your bio. Yeah? Make sure it's very clear that you're interested in Shibari. You don't necessarily have to explain your reasons so thoroughly, but having that is so much easier for people. So if I was looking on field, then knowing that this person is actively interested in Shibari would just make it so much easier to connect with. Because it can be very daunting, right, to have to ask people if they're interested in this. For me, it's a little easier just because it is my job. So it is one of the first things I usually have to introduce about myself. But if you're specifically on field looking for that, make it clear that you're interested in Shibari, and maybe make it clear what you're interested in about it, that you want to get tied, you feel more submissive, that you want someone to just attend events with and maybe switch, both tie and untie, both tie and get tied. Yeah, make that clear in your profile. That can really help. I wouldn't necessarily say you have to include a photo of yourself in rope, but having it in writing can definitely be very, very helpful. So we can go through a little bit about that in the Q&A afterwards in the group chat. Yeah, and if you happen to know about this thing called the BDSM test, there's a website for testing. It basically gives you a lot of questions regarding all different areas of kink. And it can help compile a very nice list and show what you're more interested in. If you're more of a masochist, if you're more submissive, if you are more primal maybe, or you really like discipline, all of these things are very, very good ways of sharing with other people without having to say that. It's not necessarily 100% accurate, But it is quite a helpful resource if you're not very comfortable talking about your interests and you do want to share that with other people. Any tips on material? Do you have to shibari specific rope? Usually when we come to shibari, we usually use jute rope. It's very close to hemp. If you can get access to hemp rope, that is also good. But this is the more traditional use of shibari, is in jute. If you are just starting though, and your intention is to play in the bedroom mostly, you're not really interested in suspension, you don't necessarily want to do such complicated stuff with it, then cotton rope is quite easy to find. You can usually find it at most sex toy shops. It's a lot easier to clean. There's less fluff and hair. So I would say cotton rope is a great starter. And if you want to get serious about shibari, you want to invest in buying some nice jute rope. If you want to buy it from the hardware, I have done that before. The hardware store can often sell jute or hemp rope. But I would just point out that it's going to be quite rough. Usually hardware rope is really, really tough. You might need to treat that. So there's usually a process that we do to treat rope to make it softer. And often it comes with chemicals on the outside of the rope from the processing in the factory. And that can be quite sensitive for a lot of people's skin. So if you want to buy hardware rope, you either have to treat it a lot, which can be quite tedious, or you can buy it from a specific shibari seller who has probably treated it and cut it and added knots at the end. So that might be a bit better start for you if you want to start with shibari. So yes, I just tried to answer one more question before I finish up here. Parties. Any good munches in London? There are quite a lot of munches in London. Again, there's a lot to search through. So I would first really check about who you would identify with more and using those keywords for your search too. There's a nice munch I can recommend to you. Not munch, but there's like a nice social shibari jam based in South London. If you're in Clapham area, there's one organized by someone on the Instagram called the Ropey People. It's a very nice crowd. It's one of the spaces that I like to go to a lot in London. Some spaces can be very big and very daunting, so not easy to kind of sort yourself into at the beginning. If you're a little bit more confident, though, there are a lot of very, very big spaces in London, and you can easily find those on Google. Okay, so I think there are some questions still about the rope. Let's leave that to the Q&A. So the last thing that I would just like to finish up on is, so when we want to start with shibari, like I said before, please be very mindful about how you approach people. It's very easy for us to get excited, and it's such an interesting art form. But it's very, very helpful to share your personal motivations about it and to really take the time to listen to why someone else might want to do it. This will really help you to set up good communication habits. I would say you can offer to tie with someone, but don't necessarily come up with this whole fantasy of what am I going to do to you, because you haven't really gotten consent about whether you can do this. So usually it's helpful to ask quite directly and don't necessarily go straight into a role play when you are talking to people, when you're dating with people, and you're suggesting that you should tie together. In my opinion, it's always much safer to first get things clear and in a very direct, in a very candid manner. And then when you feel like you've understood each other a little bit better, then you can maybe start including a little bit of role play. You can start sending them some very nicely worded texts about it, but please don't approach people like that. Yeah, don't make that your opening line when you're dating, when you just pinged with someone. Try to really get to know them as a person before you try to get to know them through kink. Okay, so I know that this might not be exactly what people were expecting, but after teaching Shibari for quite a few years, I've noticed that ultimately introducing Shibari has a lot to do with communication skills and about understanding how to start and how to do these events, more than the rope. There's a lot of resources out there. And if you really want to understand my approach as well, you're welcome to check out my Patreon page where I have a lot of videos for beginners. So thank you so much, everyone who took the time to listen and took the time to chat with me here on this live. If you have any more questions, we're going to move over to the Q&A on the group chat now. So thank you all for joining in. And I hope to be talking to you soon on the group chat.